Hi, this is Eric Thompson. I am owner, founder, and lead investment advisor of Peerless Wealth, a registered investment advisory firm located in Columbus, Ohio. As always, thank you for tuning in. So the title of this video is Market Predictions and Forecasts. How good are they? Well, we're sitting here in February of 2024, and about a month ago, toward the beginning of the year, for any of you that listen to the financial news especially, there's no shortage of sort of New Year's predictions for what markets might do for the next 12 months. And usually they ask a bunch of economists and financial firms, what do you think the S&P 500 will do this calendar year? And it never fails. I typically will get a call or an email from a client, and it doesn't always have to be in January or the early in the year, but they'll read an article that says, hey, this guy at Goldman Sachs predicts this, this, and this, or this guy, at The Economist magazine predicts this, this, and this. Shouldn't we do something? So let's take a little bit deeper dive. Like, are these guys always right? So I ran across an illustration, and I'm going to show you this year's S&P 500 price targets for the top investment firms in the universe. Recognize most of these names. I'm going to get the image up there right now. So this is actually the percentage up or down that these firms think that the S&P 500, often referred to as the stock market, will do this year in 2024. And you see down there at the bottom all the firms that are giving opinions. It starts with a company called Fundstrat. You see Oppenheimer, UBS, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan. So all the big Wall Street firms, all the so-called brightest and most talented economists are analyzing this to death, and they're coming up with what they think the market is going to do by the end of the year. And what we see at the top, and this is organized by the one at the left, this far one at the left is called Fundstrat. That's the group that thinks the S&P is going to do the best. And you can see that number is about 10%. And in fact, the first half a dozen or so are at 10% or just below. And then you have a bunch of groups in the middle that are predicting somewhere closer to 5%. And then the most bearish, and again, bearish is defined as negative in stock market terms. The most bearish is at the far right, which is JP Morgan. And it appears that they are forecasting a negative 10% in the S&P 500 for this year. So that's the consensus, which is all over the map. Here's what's interesting. The next the next illustration was last year's version of the same thing. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's what these guys predict now. What did they predict last year? So at the far left, we have Bank of America that predicted maybe it's a 1% rate of return, because it's just north of zero there. And then just out of curiosity, JP Morgan, not all the way to the right, but right of center, looks to have predicted maybe a 7% rate of return. There was not one firm, aside from maybe Deutsche Bank in the middle, that highest yellow dot. Deutsche Bank looks to have predicted maybe a 14% rate of return. This is for the year 2023. So these predictions were made at the beginning of 2023. So every firm except for Deutsche Bank was at 10% or below. So what did the S&P actually do in 2023? It did 26%. So there wasn't one firm on here that was even close. So the point of this is don't put too much weight into so-called experts' opinions in what I would consider a short-term investment horizon. 1 year, when you're saving for retirement, the analogy I use is like you're running a marathon. Every year is a mile. And most people takes several decades, could be 26 miles, 26 years to save for retirement. So don't put too much faith into 1-year predictions. What tends to hold true is that the longer period that we go, when we get to 3 years, 5 years, and 10-year averages, the long-term average of the S&P 500, which is the top 500 companies in the United States, owning those, averages about 9 to 10% a year. Each year you'll get significant variability from those. But the more sampling periods you have, the longer time period you go out, I feel very comfortable with a prediction of 7 to 10% annually, but you have to have at least a 5 or 10 year average period of time to sort of get that. So I don't really pay much attention to a year-by-year forecast because I've pretty much just proven the reason not to. These are the so-called best and the brightest. They get it completely wrong, year after year, and really don't have any consistency and accurate predictions. So, the next time you put too much faith in a short-term prediction, just remember this video. And as always, I'm here if you have questions or concerns, or if you want to chat. As always, thanks for tuning in.